The room was still humming when my father stepped inside, sunlight cutting across the hospital floor, my newborn asleep on my chest. I was exhausted, hollowed out, trying to feel proud, when a single question drifted toward me and landed wrong. It didn't belong in that room. It didn't belong in my life, and yet it cracked something open that I didn't know was already breaking. If you've ever trusted the wrong person, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Because stories like this don't look dramatic until it's too late. I remember staring at the ceiling tiles, counting the cracks, feeling my body go cold while my mind raced ahead of itself. Nothing he said made sense, but everything suddenly did. In that quiet space between breaths, holding my child, I felt the weight of years rearrange themselves. That was the moment everything started to unravel. I thought giving birth would be the moment my life finally felt whole. Instead, it was the moment everything cracked. I was lying in a small county hospital room, light buzzing overhead, my body trembling with exhaustion while my newborn slept against my chest. I felt hollow and proud at the same time, stunned that I had survived labor mostly alone. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and cotton, and the world felt fragile, like it might shatter if I breathed too hard. Then someone unexpected stepped inside. I wasn't prepared for the weight that entered with him, or how the air shifted before a single word landed. One question pressed into me, slow and sharp, asking whether a monthly sum I had never seen had somehow been enough. The words didn't fit the room, or my life, or the reality I thought I was living. My mind stalled, my body went cold. I stared at my baby, searching his tiny face for steadiness. In that quiet pause, holding my son, I knew something was terribly wrong deep inside me. I thought giving birth would be the moment my life finally felt whole. Instead, it was the moment everything cracked. I was lying in a small county hospital room, light buzzing overhead, my body trembling with exhaustion while my newborn slept against my chest. I felt hollow and proud at the same time, stunned that I had survived labor mostly alone. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and cotton, and the world felt fragile, like it might shatter if I breathed too hard. Then someone unexpected stepped inside. I wasn't prepared for the weight that entered with him, or how the air shifted before a single word landed. One question pressed into me, slow and sharp, asking whether a monthly sum I had never seen had somehow been enough. The words didn't fit the room, or my life, or the reality I thought I was living. My mind stalled, my body went cold. I stared at my baby, searching his tiny face for steadiness. In that quiet pause, holding my son, I knew something was terribly wrong deep inside me. I entered that house believing it was temporary, a stepping stone while we built our own life. I told myself compromise was part of marriage, that sharing space meant sharing sacrifices. At first, it even felt practical, almost comforting, like we were being responsible adults, but daily life there had rules I never agreed to. Money flowed through hands that weren't mine. Groceries, toiletries, even basic personal needs required quiet explanations. I learned to calculate every purchase in my head before opening my mouth, rehearsing justifications that made me sound grateful instead of desperate. Nothing was ever said directly. That was the hardest part. Eyes followed me when I cooked. Notes were made when I showered too long. Laundry soap, electricity, food portions, all became invisible measurements of my worth. I started adjusting myself before anyone asked, shrinking my needs so I wouldn't be noticed. My husband seemed comfortable there. He trusted the system because it was familiar to him. When discomfort crept up my spine, I told myself I was being sensitive, dramatic, ungrateful. I convinced myself that love meant endurance, that stability required silence. Slowly, I stopped recognizing the woman in the mirror. I hesitated before buying things I needed. I apologized for existing in shared spaces. I measured my voice, my footsteps, my appetite. The house felt smaller each week, not because of walls, but because of how little room there was for me. I didn't see it as control then. I saw it as discipline, structure, family. I kept believing that if I tried harder, blended better, things would soften. I didn't realize I was fading until the idea of a baby felt like hope. I held on to that belief, unaware how fragile it was, and how much more I was about to lose completely, utterly. When I found out I was pregnant, something inside me softened. I believed a baby would change the atmosphere, that love would finally feel louder than control. I imagined shared excitement, careful hands, a sense that we were in this together at last. For a brief moment, hope felt reasonable. I told myself this was the turning point, that responsibility would wake something dormant in my marriage. I pictured warmth where there had been tension, partnership where there had been distance. Instead, the rules multiplied. My body became another thing to manage. Spending tightened further, justified as preparation. I was told what I needed, what I didn't, what was excessive. Even nourishment felt like something I had to earn. I learned to swallow cravings along with my words. Appointments happened without company. Decisions were discussed around me instead of with me. I rested when permitted and worked when necessary, carrying both exhaustion and guilt as if they were part of pregnancy itself. What hurt most wasn't the restriction, but the absence. The absence of curiosity about how I felt, the absence of protection when I was vulnerable, the absence of reassurance when fear crept in late at night. Slowly, the belief that a baby would fix anything dissolved. Hope didn't shatter. It thinned, stretched, and faded until loneliness took its place. I started noticing how careful I was becoming, how small my world felt, and how survival required constant calculation. By the time my body was changing, my understanding changed too. Love hadn't grown louder, control had. That truth stayed. I started to feel poor in ways that didn't make sense to me. Every day came with small calculations that felt humiliating, especially while I was pregnant, at the grocery store. I stood longer than necessary, comparing prices, putting things back, convincing myself cravings were childish wants instead of needs. There were mornings when I skipped breakfast so food would last, nights when I worked late, hunched over a laptop, my back aching, eyes burning, telling myself the exhaustion was temporary. I took every freelance task I could find, even when my hands shook from fatigue, because I believed effort could solve everything. Healthcare became a quiet worry. I delayed appointments, spaced them out, told myself I was being practical. I chose cheaper options for vitamins, sometimes none at all, reasoning that women had survived worse. Each choice felt like a personal failure rather than a warning sign. What confused me most was how careful I was while still feeling behind. Bills were paid, but barely. Comfort was always postponed. I blamed myself for not budgeting better, not earning more, not stretching further. I wondered why other families managed pregnancy with joy while I managed it with anxiety. There were moments that lingered, standing in a store aisle debating whether a small comfort was irresponsible, lying awake at night calculating numbers that never added up, feeling embarrassed by how little I needed and how impossible even that felt. I kept believing this strain was normal, that it would ease once the baby arrived. Still, a quiet question kept surfacing. One I pushed away. Why did surviving feel this hard? That unease followed me into labor. I carried it silently, unsure who to trust. Already exhausted before contractions began, sensing the hospital would mirror the loneliness I had learned to accept. When labor began, it didn't feel dramatic. It felt inconvenient to everyone but me. I remember breathing through the first waves alone, being told it was probably nothing, that I was overreacting, that there was time. Getting to the hospital felt like crossing a border by myself. The ride was quiet, the doors slid open, and I checked in holding my own fear. I was placed in a small room, lights low, sounds muffled, surrounded by people doing their jobs while no one stayed. Hours passed in fragments. I watched the clock, listened to footsteps in the hall, waited for someone to notice how scared I was. My phone stayed silent. Each contraction came and went without a hand to hold or a voice reminding me I wasn't alone. When my son finally arrived, there was no rush of celebration, just relief, exhaustion, and a deep ache I couldn't name. They placed him on my chest, warm and fragile, and I whispered apologies into his hair for the quiet, for the struggle, for not being able to give him more. I lay there afterward, empty and full at the same time, staring at the ceiling. The room felt too big, too still. I didn't know it yet, but that silence was about to break in a way I never expected. When morning light slipped into the hospital room, everything felt suspended. My son slept beside me. The machines hummed softly, and I was still drifting in that fog where pain and relief blur together. Then my father walked in. Seeing him there didn't feel comforting at first. It felt disorienting. He stood too still, his eyes taking in details I had learned to ignore: the small room, the thin blankets, the way I was holding my baby like I was afraid he might disappear. He asked one question, quietly, almost casually, about the monthly support he believed I had been receiving, not as an accusation, as a simple check. As if the answer was obvious, the moment stretched, sound drained from the room, my heartbeat filled my ears. I remember staring at his face, searching for a hint that he was mistaken, that exhaustion had scrambled my hearing, but nothing inside me could connect his question to my life. I had never seen that money, not once, not during the years of scraping by. Not during pregnancy, not while choosing between groceries and vitamins. The realization landed slowly, like something heavy sinking through water. In that frozen moment, memories rearranged themselves. Every sacrifice, every apology. Every night I told myself we were just struggling like everyone else. I looked down at my son, my hands suddenly shaking. Whatever that question meant. I knew it wasn't small. It wasn't fixable with excuses. It was the start of a truth that would change everything, and there was no turning back from it. The door opened again, and this time it wasn't quiet. My husband and his mother stepped in, carrying an energy that didn't match the room. They looked rested, composed, almost celebratory. Like they were arriving somewhere familiar instead of standing beside a woman who had just given birth. I watched them through a strange new lens. Everything about them felt louder now. The confidence, the ease, the way they took up space without checking if there was room. As my father's presence anchored the room, the truth began to surface without anyone needing to raise a voice. The money he believed he had been sending for my care had been going somewhere else. Not lost, not delayed, redirected, managed, used. Understanding came in waves. Scenes replayed in my mind with brutal clarity. The times I was told there wasn't enough, the way my needs were minimized, how I was made to feel irresponsible for wanting basics. None of it had been confusion. None of it had been necessity. It had been choice. I realized how often silence had been used as a shield, how my husband had stepped back instead of stepping up, how his mother had enforced rules while benefiting from the comfort they denied me. Every moment I had doubted myself suddenly rearranged into a pattern that was impossible to ignore. The anger surprised me by how calm it was. It didn't burn. It settled. It clarified. I felt something detach inside me, something that had been holding on for too long. I stopped searching their faces for explanation or remorse. I didn't need either. In that hospital bed, holding my son, I drew a line I would not cross again. Whatever came next, I knew one thing with certainty. I was done shrinking, and I was done pleading. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. Something inside me went still, and in that stillness, everything became clear. I saw how long I had been pleading in ways I never named. Pleading to be considered, pleading to be protected, pleading for honesty from people who had already decided my comfort was optional. In that hospital bed, holding my son, I understood that no explanation could undo what had been chosen again and again. Promises suddenly sounded empty before they were even formed. Apologies felt irrelevant. I wasn't angry. I was finished. Finished bargaining for decency. Finished shrinking myself to keep peace that never included me. For the first time, accepting help didn't feel like failure. It felt like oxygen. I let myself lean into support without apology, without justifying why I needed it. I stopped believing I had to earn safety through suffering. Leaving wasn't dramatic. It was deliberate. Papers were signed, decisions were made. I focused on my baby's steady breathing and followed the calm voice guiding me forward. As I was wheeled out of that room, I felt something unfamiliar settle into my chest. Relief, not happiness yet, but space, distance, the quiet certainty that I was finally choosing myself, and that choice would carry me somewhere safe for my son and the woman I am. Leaving the hospital felt unreal, like stepping out of a storm into a place too quiet to trust. The car ride was silent except for my son's breathing, and I kept waiting for something to go wrong, for someone to tell me this calm wasn't meant for me. The place we arrived at was clean, still, and unfamiliar. Soft light, open space, doors that closed gently instead of slamming. Everything felt deliberate, as if peace had been planned in advance. It made my chest tighten. I didn't know how to exist in a room where no one was watching me. People moved carefully around me, offering food, water, rest without conditions. I felt awkward receiving it. My instincts kept bracing, preparing explanations that no one asked for. Even kindness felt suspicious after so long without it. That first night, I lay awake listening to nothing, no arguments through walls, no footsteps measuring my presence, just quiet. It was unsettling. I realized how deeply chaos had trained my body to stay alert, how rest felt like something I hadn't earned, but slowly, something loosened. I watched my son sleep without fear. I exhaled fully for the first time in months. The constant knot in my stomach softened. Safety didn't arrive like relief. It arrived like confusion. Still, as morning light filled the room, I allowed myself one small truth. This place was real, and for now, it was ours, at last. Once the noise settled and my body began to rest, I felt something stir that surprised me. It wasn't urgency or fear. It was a quiet desire to build something that belonged to me. The idea came from memory, from the clothes that never fit, the products I couldn't afford, the small comforts I wished existed when I was pregnant and scared. I started sketching during nap times, notes spread across the table, my son breathing softly beside me. It felt fragile, but it felt honest. I didn't want rescue. I wanted structure. I accepted guidance, a formal loan, clear expectations. Knowing I would have to earn every step made the work feel grounded instead of gifted. There were no shortcuts, only learning curves. Days blurred into nights. I worked while my son slept and rested when my hands shook too much to continue. Some days I doubted myself. Other days, I felt steady in a way I never had before. Effort replaced apology. A few people stepped in quietly, not to control, but to support. They offered knowledge, feedback, and space to decide for myself. That respect mattered more than encouragement. The first samples arrived in simple packaging. I held them longer than necessary, running my fingers over seams, realizing this idea had weight now. It existed outside my head. Momentum didn't feel loud. It felt earned. I wasn't chasing success. I was building stability. And for the first time, my future felt like something I was shaping with my own hands. I moved slowly, learning patience, trusting process over panic, letting growth happen at human speed. Each small win rewired my confidence. I wasn't proving anything to anyone. I was becoming someone I could finally rely on. That realization felt steady and strong enough to carry us forward. Success arrived quietly, not as applause, but as steadiness. Orders became consistent. Emails shifted from hesitation to trust. I paid bills on time and stopped holding my breath every time I checked my account. Work felt validating, not flashy. Each small milestone told me my effort made sense. I built routines around my son's schedule, mornings filled with purpose instead of dread. Home felt predictable, safe. That mattered more than numbers. Motherhood grounded everything. I measured progress in calm evenings, stocked refrigerators, and the way my body no longer lived in panic. I wasn't chasing escape anymore. I was maintaining balance. I heard, eventually, that my ex-husband and his mother were struggling, finances tight, plans falling apart. The information landed without satisfaction. I didn't feel joy or justice, just distance. Their choices had consequences, but they were no longer mine to carry. What surprised me most was how empty revenge felt. I had imagined success as proof, as something loud enough to correct the past. Instead, it felt soft, internal, mine. Growth rooted in peace feels different. It doesn't need witnesses. It doesn't demand acknowledgement. It simply holds. I looked at my life and felt complete in a way I never had before, not because I won, but because I stopped fighting. That quiet balance became my definition of success, and it carried me forward, open to whatever purpose waited beyond myself, with gratitude guiding my choices from that point. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, the kind I once rushed through. I was closing my laptop when a message came in from a woman I didn't know, thanking me for something I had built. She said it helped her feel less alone. I sat there longer than necessary, letting that settle. I thought about the girl I was in that small house, shrinking, apologizing for existing. The distance between us felt vast, not in years, but in breath. Pain used to feel like an ending. Now it felt like a bridge. Everything I survived sharpened my ability to notice others, to listen without fixing, to give without losing myself. I stopped measuring life by what was taken from me and started measuring it by what I could offer. Gratitude became practical. I showed up fully for my son. I mentored quietly. I built spaces where control didn't live. None of it was dramatic. All of it was intentional. Standing there, I realized the story wasn't about escape or success. It was about becoming someone safe. For myself, for my child, for people I might never meet. That understanding felt complete, like a circle closing gently, leaving me ready to share what I learned and finally let this story rest. I carry it forward with humility, aware healing continues, and trusting that purpose grows when shared honestly with others always. I think about the woman I was at the beginning of this story, standing in a hospital room unsure of her own worth. I think about who I am now, steady, present, and unafraid of silence. The distance between those versions of me wasn't crossed by luck. It was crossed by choice. I learned that self-worth doesn't arrive when someone finally understands you. It arrives when you stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. I learned that silence can be a warning, but it can also be an invitation to listen inward. And I learned that leaving isn't failure. Staying when you are disappearing is... Today, my life feels quieter, not smaller. I wake up grounded. I make decisions without fear. I trust my instincts again. Peace didn't erase the past, but it softened its grip, turning pain into information and memory into guidance. If you are listening to this and something in it feels familiar, I want you to know you are not weak for hoping. You are not foolish for staying. And you are not broken for needing time to choose yourself. Thank you for sitting with my story and carrying it gently. If you feel comfortable, share your experience in the comments so others can see themselves reflected, like this video if it helped you, and share it with someone who needs it. This isn't the end. It's the moment we begin telling the truth out loud together, with courage, compassion, and honesty forward.